Hello and welcome to another episode of He Says, She Says Film Reviews. And today we're looking at Guillermo del Toro's brand new movie, Nightmare Alley. And as you can imagine, del Toro is one of those directors that people in Hollywood line up to work with. So he had his pick of Hollywood with this movie, and he went with some massive stars. Now, this is actually a remake of a movie from the 1940s and from a novel that was written even before then. It centers around Stanton Carlyle, played here by Bradley Cooper, who is a man on the run from his past. He's done something that he's not proud of, and he leaves that world and enters the new world of carnivals. And it's by joining a carnival that he meets Clem Hotley, played by Willem Dafoe, who runs an auditorium at a carnival in Middle America. And part of that auditorium is having someone that Clem calls a geek, a character who is supposed to be only partially human and completely wild and feral. And it's through that Stanton starts to realize that carnivals are all one great big show and nothing is as it seems. Now, at the same time, he meets Xena the Seer, played by Toni Collette, who is the psychic at that carnival. And through her husband, who is a former seer himself, but now is an alcoholic that's taken away from his stage show. His name's Pete, and he's played by David Strathairn. Stanton starts to realize that that's something that perhaps he could do. He could become a showman who predicts people's futures by picking up on different things and basically conning people. Now, he takes over that role and starts to learn all that he can, all while meeting the girl Molly, who's called the Electric Girl at the carnival, called Rooney Mara, who he falls in love with and he wishes to take away from the carnival. Everything then all comes together for everybody's lives when they end up meeting Dr. Lilith Ritter, played by Cate Blanchett, who introduces him to a whole new con. Now, as you would expect from Del Toro's movies, this is a pretty dark film. So I introduce now my co-host Lee. What did you think of Nightmare Alley?
While I was watching Nightmare Alley, I could just feel that the darkness of the movie. I would definitely call it sinister and evilness within it. I definitely saw it as a psychological thriller, actually. I didn't go into the movie realizing how much of a psychological thriller it was, but as I was watching it, I could see throughout the storyline that it was becoming more and more, going more and more evil, I guess. And it certainly took you on a bit of a ride with your emotions. There was the man or beast freak show storyline, and I found myself really being challenged ethically and morally through that storyline, because there wasn't really many people or anyone trying to intercede or to make a difference and make a change for people who are being treated in an inhumane way. Obviously the whole point of what they called freak show was people paid money to see the unusual, but at a cost to someone else. And so through the story, you couldn't see. There was one scene really where police tried to intercept, but they were manipulated, and so you really didn't see much about changing that. And you could see natural consequences throughout the movie to things like being involved with a freak show, but you couldn't see people purposely trying to change it. So that was one thing, but it was really fascinating. This movie was really fascinating, and it really drew you in different scenes. The performance of Bradley Cooper, amazing. You really connected with his character in a lot of ways. And whether he was making good choices or not good choices at all, you kind of wanted him to succeed no matter what. I felt like I was taken on this journey with him that I just wanted his character to succeed. He's involved in a lot of different, I suppose, different topics within the movie, and you see him change throughout the movie, I think.
Yeah.
You see his character evolve, you see him, whether it's a good evolve or not a good evolve, I don't want to give away too much of the storyline, but you definitely see him changing throughout the movie, and did a really great role of that. There are some fantastic people in here. Cate Blanchett, she did an amazing role as a psychiatrist. And yeah, I don't want to give away too much of her character, but she's just really fascinating. Toni Collette playing Xena the Seer. There was a real human connection with that character, I felt. And the scenes with her, and also with her, there was a lot of scenes with a character called Pete, which Dave just spoke about recently, or he spoke about earlier. They brought a real humanness to the movie, and you really wanted to connect with those characters, and you felt that while there was manipulation for being involved in the freak show or circus, whatever you want to call it, you could see there was a moral aspect to these characters that you didn't see with a lot of other characters. And so they really drew you in as well. I love the cinematography in some of the scenes too, I have to say. There were a few shots that just stood out. There was lightning behind some of the carnival rides. And I just felt like that was just amazing shot. There was also external shots of a billionaire's home with all the snow, and one of the vehicles was going up towards their house, and I felt that that shot was just beautiful as well. And so in a very dark movie, you had these beautiful shots here and there that just became more intriguing to the story.
It almost feels like you watch two films when you watch this. The first half of the film set at the carnival, it reminded me a lot of I think it would have been late 90s, early 2000s television show that I loved called Carnivale, which was kind of a dark gothic show that was set in a carnival. What I found really interesting, though, that Del Toro played around with here was that every character saw Stanton almost in a different light. Like, if you go back and think about the film, the Major, played by Mark Povolini, the dwarf at the carnival, and also Bruno, played by Ron Perlman, they instantly take a disliking to Stanton and are telling people not to trust this guy, that there's something with him not to be trusted. Toni Collette's character instantly almost falls for his charms in a sexual way. It's really weird how different people view the character of Stanton, and I think Del Toro does that really, really well throughout this film. You can tell that Del Toro is a little bit like Martin Scorsese as a director, where he really likes to explore the human psyche and how different people react to different people in different situations. We saw it with The Shape of Water, his last film that he made as well. But yeah, it feels like you're watching two films, because then when they move to the capital city and you have the introduction of Lilith as a character, it feels like a almost like an entirely different film, but somehow Del Toro makes that work. I think a lot of other directors wouldn't have been able to make that work in the way that he has. I think he gets the best out of his cast here. I think Bradley Cooper is absolutely amazing playing Stanton. I also really loved William Dafoe playing Clem. There's been some people out there that have said that Clem is more of what the real P.G. Barnum was like that we saw in The Greatest Showman, because he basically ran an auditorium, the same as what Clem does here. But William Dafoe does what William Dafoe always does. He just takes the character and completely runs with it. He seems to love playing evil characters, William Dafoe, as well. And I also thought, yeah, like you say, Cate Blanchett is fantastic in this. The scenes that her and Bradley Cooper share in Lila's office feels like you're watching a play rather than a film. It's so intense, and yeah, just the body language between the two of them, even when they're not speaking, is magnificent.
Definitely. I think, there are some twists in the movie, which obviously we're not going to do spoilers because, you want to see that for yourself. But there's definitely a storyline. Also, there's a lot of crime in the movie, throughout the movie. But there's also a storyline almost of the rich versus poor people surviving. You've got the rich paying for the things that they want and almost thinking that they can buy anything. Like they can almost buy eternal life, if you want to put it that way. But then you have those that are scraping by, and then those that aspire to get out of that life into the rich life. And it certainly shows throughout the movie that maybe rich isn't always what it's cracked up to be, and can actually bring you a lot of trouble as well. And the power and control that can come with money. And so, you see, I guess, the full circle of someone being poor to rich to where do you land up? Where do you land in the end?
And Del Toro, I think, plays with that again as well. I mean, you've got Stanton, who almost feels like he's out of August Strindberg's Miss Julia theatre show, where he'll step on anybody to get from the ground up to the higher echelons of being rich. Then you've got characters like Molly Rooney Mara's character, who says to him at one point, being rich is not about money. To her, it's being happy and being in a relationship with him. Yeah. She doesn't care if he's living in the gutter or working at a carnival, as long as he's with her. But no, everything to him becomes about money and everything like that. So I think, Del Toro plays around with that a lot and does that really, really well throughout this film. I agree with what you said. I think the look that he brings to this film is right too. He wanted this to be a gothic thriller, and he does that so well with and I was impressed with you how many times above the carnival he'd have a storm and have great shots of the Ferris wheel with the lightning flashing behind it and stuff like that. And it kind of look-wise and the way he shot it actually reminded me a lot of Shutter Island by Martin Scorsese, and also Water for Elephants, the film with Robert Pattinson, how that starts off with life in the circus is all nice and everything, and then you see what kind of people actually work at the circus and how cruel they are. And I think, but like normal, Del Toro has surpassed himself once again with just making this beautifully looking film. It is long, so be prepared for being in the theatre for a little bit longer than what you would normally be. But that's, I think, part of Del Toro's style of filmmaking these days as well. So I guess, what are you going to give this one out of 5?
I think when I first walked out of the cinema, I would have given it a 3, because it is so dark that I did walk away not depressed, but almost carrying that darkness, because it's not a happy story, really. But after reflecting on it, I actually think I'm going to give it a 4, because that psychological thriller element of it, it stays with you. And then over time, I was like reflecting back on all the scenes that I did really find intriguing. And yeah, so I think it was made really well, in the fact that I had that moral issue of why isn't anyone doing anything about this, and I was still frustrated at the end of the film that no one was there to help fix the situation. But then that's what the film's about, is to show what life was like and to show what these places did, and that they did go on for quite some time. So yeah, the intensity of the film and the beautiful cinematography, the acting, everyone who acted in it had a great performance. So I'm actually going to give it 4.5.
Yeah, I was going to say Del Toro does that magnificent thing sometimes where you'll have the darkest of scene, but he makes it really beautiful. And there's a scene in this where I won't ruin it too much, but that like the blood splatters onto the snow, and Del Toro shoots it in such a way that it almost looks poetic and beautiful, even though you know that something vile and sinister is happening. So yeah, I'm glad that Del Toro is back to his best, because while I admired what he did for The Shape of Water, I didn't like the film. And I certainly didn't like Pacific Rim. So, yeah, I don't think Del Toro should be making big Hollywood blockbusters. I think this is more his domain, where he gets to explore characterization and make something a little bit gothic and a little bit sinister. So I'm giving it 4.5 as well. So that's it for this episode of He Says, She Says Film Reviews. We both gave Nightmare Alley 4.5 stars. Go along, check it out. See Mr. Del Toro back to his best again when it comes to filmmaking. But for now, I've been Dave G.
And I'm Lee G.
And we'll be back soon with another episode of He Says, She Says Film Reviews.